So this is going to be my audience today. There's my other audience member. There is my third walking off. You ever noticed when we're having discussions revolving around race and racial equality, they tend to be very divisive subjects. And this is very ironic and interesting to me because according to the Pew Research Center that did this poll, 52% of African Americans believe that the color of their skin has proved to be a disadvantage at some point in their life. And on the contrary, white Americans, 45% of them believe that the color of their skin has proved to be a benefit in their life. So there tends to be this social awareness of what the difference is to be a Black person in America versus being a white person in America. But then whenever we get into discussions regarding reparations or affirmative action or even police reform, there tends to be very heavy opposition. And being an African American woman myself and having had these types of conversations with my peers, what I'm starting to see as a trend is that most Americans either are unaware of or completely deny the existence of systemic racism today. And I'm here to tell you today that it is very prevalent today and it is still in effect and affects us on a daily basis. It is most prevalent in our education, in our housing, and most dangerous in our criminal justice system. But starting with just education, the reason why there's such a disparity all goes down to how schools are funded, and they are funded by our property tax. So this means that, if an area is low income, that their funding for their school tends to be lower income as well. This does disproportionately affect African American students because 21% of African Americans live below the poverty line. Going into this article by Linda Darling called Unequal Opportunities, Race and Education, she goes into some statistics that were proven of the 4 major things that prove to be the most critical to a student's success in their academic career. That starts with first, a small class size. Second, a small school body, a school where people can know each other on a first name basis. On top of that, a challenging curriculum. So in many cases, this can be, ACT prep, SAT prep for middle schoolers, going into college prep for high schoolers, and so on. And on top of that, qualified and enthusiastic teachers. All this comes into play with the disadvantage of African Americans facing this because in a lot of these high concentrations of low-income minority schools, majority of them being majority Black student bodies, they are 2 times the student body of their white counterparts, meaning a majority Black school in the same city of a majority white school is most likely to have twice the school body size of that white school. On top of that, the majority Black schools tends to have an 80% larger class size. Not only that, the curriculum that they have, sometimes they are facing challenges in providing, the core curriculum, much less anything further challenging than that. And on top of that, because they are unable to pay teachers any competitive rate, they also are having trouble with, being able to provide well-qualified teachers. So sometimes the teachers that they hire are underqualified, both in terms of experience and in terms of their education. So this kind of already starts an unlevel playing field in terms of an academic career. And we see this spill over into our secondary education, where 34% of African Americans, all who have above a 3.5 GPA, are still more likely to go to a community college rather than a funded selective university. On top of that, only 19% of African Americans have a bachelor's degree in comparison to 33% of white Americans that all own a bachelor's degree. And despite all this being prevalent, 44% of Americans still are against affirmative action. Moving on into housing. Now, race has played a very critical role in housing historically. It wasn't nothing but, 50, 60 years ago that we were segregated. This still goes back into the Great Depression. So during the Great Depression, there were a lot of government agencies created to help with low-income housing. And most of these at the time, again, this is still during the segregation era, were serving only whites. So African Americans during this time were not able to get any government assistance, or if they were, most of them were serving mostly white recipients, if not only white recipients. This is ironic because those same low-income housings that they were denied were being built mostly near slums and outside of Black neighborhoods. The reason why is because the property value around these areas were already very critically low. According to bookings, though, however, today in 2020, 2021, Black homes are underpriced by over $150 billion in total all across the country. And the reason why that is because this racial bias is still extremely prevalent in housing today. I believe it was Newsport that actually did a secret investigation in Long Island, New York, where they secretly recorded agents and real estate agents and their behaviors with people of different colors. And it showed that Africans were 49% of the time racially discriminated against in their study. And this is just, a proof of what has already been said, that African Americans are biased in the selecting homes. Most of the time they're required to have pre-qualifications that their white counterparts don't have. They can have the same income, same budget, same requirements, but they will still be shown completely different properties, completely different neighborhoods as their white counterparts. And that's very prevalent today. Just look into redlining and things of that nature. African Americans' homes are undervalued simply by their presence. It is shown by, I believe it was ABC News has covered a couple of stories involving incidents where African Americans have received appraisals of their homes, had a white person or pretend to be the owner, pretty much erase all Blackness. And in some cases, the appraisal for their home has jumped up to 50% because for some reason, even though there's racial equality, for some reason, Black presence still devalues homes in today's age, which is strange to think that we're supposed to be living in a time of no racial bias and racism is a thing of the past. Systemic racism is still very huge in housing. Although it hurts in the housing industry, it is most dangerous and most prevalent and most talked about in our criminal justice system, especially with the last few years, with these last few fatal shootings that we've noticed with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, so on and so forth. Black Lives Matter has been a big conversation in the media. And the reason why it is such a big conversation is because police literally started out as a way to control and to oppress African Americans. This is such a huge conversation because 22% of fatal police shootings are involving an African American. And that doesn't even include other types of police brutality, but it is almost completely agreed that African Americans tend to face more discrimination in their dealings with police. The African American person is 5 times more likely to be stopped without just cause by a police officer than a white person, according to the NAACP and their statistics. The NAACP also goes in to describe that 1 out of every 3 Black boys is going to be sentenced to time in prison. These statistics, again, are huge because, like I said, African Americans only make up 13% of the population. So this does show a huge disparity in the way African Americans are treated and the way other nationalities, not even just white people, are treated in the criminal justice system. Now, the reason why we are discussing all these topics is because systemic racism is very prevalent in today. A simple month out of the year or a chapter out of the semester is not enough to really cover the Black experience in America. And it surely isn't enough to really illustrate how, history still echoes and replays itself in today's time and how those systems still affect African Americans disproportionately today.